There was like a personal challenge slash like finding meaning in my work type of a thing where I feel like I could, in my best attempt, even though, I'm human and I fail every single day, try to build something, a values-driven company, a culture that truly cares about all stakeholders, their teammates, their families, our partners, our customers, of course, as well as bring this idea to market that it just feels like now is the time for this to really take center stage.
Well, welcome to another episode of The People of Private Capital with me, Ferdi Roberts. I'm the CEO and founder of Asset Class. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Anthony Kennada. Anthony is the co-founder and CEO of Audience Plus. We are a delighted client of Audience Plus. But more than that, today I'm interested in delving into the history of this founder's story, understanding Anthony's background, where the genesis of the Audience Plus idea came from. He's going to share some details of the market shifts that he believes are driving companies to look at this concept called owned media. I'm a big proponent of it. Anthony's going to share some additional detail on that. We'll look at his founder origin story and understand how he came from a CMO background across 3 separate unicorns to become the CEO of Audience Plus. It's a great conversation. I have a lot of time for Anthony. Hopefully you find it interesting. And with that, I'll introduce Anthony here on The People of Private Capital. Okay, well, welcome, Anthony. Obviously, a tremendous amount going on there in your life right now. Can't wait to delve into your story. I've inadvertently followed you for a long time. I was a big fan of all your work at Gainsight, and we're going to have an opportunity to delve into some of that work as well. Not to mention that we're also a very happy client of Audience Plus. So I am a little bit biased, but delighted you could join us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Ferdi, so much for the invitation. Excited to be here with you.
Great. Well, Anthony, as is customary on the podcast, we like to start with a little bit of background, maybe roll back the years a little bit and help us contextualize how you arrived where you are now. In your role as CEO of Audience Plus and co-founder. And so can we take it back to, I guess, 09, 10, kind of your first job out of college. You went to Pepperdine, as I understand it, and you're coming out to the workforce and take your first role at Box. How did things kind of progress from that point right through to where you are now?
Sure. Well, I don't know anyone that went to school, at least back then, dreaming of a career in enterprise software, but that sort of somehow I found my way to Box. Candidly, I had kind of been bitten by the startup bug. I wanted to start a company. At the time, it was in the consumer space.
Right.
And so I was sort of like faking my way to understanding how to build an investor deck. We kind of got some small friends and family round put together. We built kind of a prototype. And so I felt like we were doing all the right things. But of course, as we all know, this entrepreneurial journey is a real hard one, especially coming out of school with no real network, no real kind of, relationships. And so I took a job moonlighting at Box while I was working on the deck and talking to would-be customers, sharpening the product, all of this. And as sort of the entrepreneurial venture started kind of declining, at least in terms of potential. This was 2009 when the cloud was just becoming, obviously much more into the sort of mainstream for how technology is adopted. So right place, right company, right time, and kind of fell in love. I fell in love with everything Silicon Valley, back then. So I started in kind of a sales and business development capacity. I joined a company called Live Office that was actually run by Nick Mehta, who we'll visit in the story here in a second. Still in the BD perspective. We sold that business to Symantec, and I made kind of a career pivot as part of that acquisition into the product organization. So I was effectively, starting a new kind of organic product development effort that was happening at Symantec, which traditionally was a very acquisitive type of business. And it was a very weird time to be at a, public scale kind of business, where my boss ended up leaving, her boss ended up, I think, either being part of a layoff or something along those lines. And so at 24 years old, I ended up working for the president of the cloud division of Symantec, leading all of product.
Wow.
So a little bit of luck, I think, contributed to that as well. And really, it was at that time where I think a couple things were happening. One, I just realized I think my heart is with startups and kind of the earlier stage kind of journey
Yeah.
of company building. And right around that same time, Nick had
Ferdi
just
Roberts.
signed on to be the CEO of a company called JBera Software, based in the middle of the country here in the States. Gave me a call and asked me about joining him, and thinking that I would be kind of building the product function for that
Right.
company that would eventually become known as Gainsight.
Yep.
He asked me about marketing, and I had never done marketing before at all.
Right.
And so basically, I joined as the first marketing hire at the company before it was called Gainsight. We had a few hundred K, maybe less, of ARR
Right.
across a handful of customers. We built that business over about 7 years when I was there to
Yeah.
about 100 million of ARR.
Wow.
Went on to become the CMO. Couple other CMO stops, and which I'm sure we'll talk about. Really found my calling
Yeah.
within marketing at the intersection of really pushing the boundaries of marketing, really thinking about the consumer, tactics applied to the B2B context.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting a company, really kind of doubling down on my whole kind of career path that got me to where I am today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think it's always good to be exposed at some point in your journey to the sales function,
Yep.
the business development function. To be out there as an individual contributor is always, it forces you to understand, your product, your market, your
Yep.
clients, the problems that you solve, which is always a great grounding. If you are entrepreneurially minded,
hmm
it always gives you a good grounding, and kind of also brings home the reality of, like, if you're going to start your own business, you're going to have to
Yes.
start knocking on doors, and you're going to have to start opening those doors, and building trust, and of course
Yep.
alongside that, building products. So the product development side of it doesn't hurt either.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to understand. You mentioned, I mean, you're three-time CMO at unicorn status companies between Gainsight and Hopin and Front, right?
Right. hmm
And so that is, I'm sure, challenging journeys across all of them. I mean, to get from a couple hundred K to 100 million is no mean feat by any, for any company. It obviously, it presents you with lots of challenges. I guess you had a front row seat to what it was
Yeah.
like trying to build those companies, and, the pros and cons, and good outcomes, bad outcomes, right? It happens.
Yep.
And as we talked about, you do learn a lot more from failures than you do from success. You get a front row seat,
Totally.
particularly as CMO, to the harsh reality of that, because you've got to handle the challenges to the market, the shifts, the twists and turns that happen in the market,
Yep.
maybe the messaging around it, depending on market conditions, etc. How well did that prepare you as a three-time CMO to take on the role of CEO now at Audience Plus?
Yeah. I think very well. I mean, I don't think anything prepares you to be a founder CEO,
Yeah.
especially. But I think, functionally, yes, prior to my career in marketing, I saw a lot of, kind of, to your point, kind of edges of the business around sales and product. Gainsight, I think, was where most of I got my 10,000 hours, so to speak, in
Right.
marketing over that course of those years. And so there, the interesting bit was creating a market, creating a movement, starting from nothing, going from 0 to 1 on a concept, let alone a product that people have never even heard of.
Yeah.
And so that was a masterclass for, especially applicable to now being a CEO in a company that's kind of a similar kind of, challenge ahead of itself.
Yeah.
It's not to say, I think our product over time is a lot more of a disruptor, but this idea of owned media, I draw analogies every day to what we were doing with customer success back in 2013.
Right.
So from that perspective, very much helped prepare me. Not to mention, of course, reporting to the board, or being present in the boardroom, working for a CEO who was dynamic, values driven. So after that experience, as you mentioned, went on to 2 other CMO roles, and each with their own sets of challenges that I think have prepared me. But I would say existentially, what was going on in the market around those times, COVID had just started. We had done a couple of layoffs at each of those businesses, unfortunately, like so many of us have now had to endure and kind of manage through. And so I went from a kind of a hard situation in creating a category, sparking a movement, to managing and leading through change and uncertainty and difficulty. And so I think all of the soft skills that came with that experience really kind of, I think, built some muscle memory into being a CEO, where it's like, I don't know, your experience, Ferdy, starting for me, that's my first time going through it, but like everything's on fire, right? So it's just a matter of like, where are you starting to put your attention on for, where are you kind of pointing your attention to first? Have you built the right team to help kind of, get more coverage on those challenges? And so I think a lot of the tougher times, I would say, through the front and Hopin experience in particular, I think has kind of put a little bit of a expectation on entrepreneurship, company building, where this idea of like downhill skiing like is not like, yes, I saw it for a part of Hopin for a short part of that journey, but by by investing in doing the hard things and the long-term focus, I have a ton of appreciation for building an enduring company. And I think those two experiences, I think, helped me kind of build that perspective and that appreciation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And in fact, I use the same expression. I'm trying to remember what book. It might be 0 to 1, but Peter Thiel. It was one of the PayPal Mafia that whose book I was reading, and it might have been a Reid Hoffman. But the story that they shared was that at PayPal, they didn't have a customer service division until somebody came to their office and was literally banging on the outside of their office trying to get in to have some issue dealt with, some refund or some challenge or other that they had. And they rationalized it. So let's assume it's Peter Thiel. He rationalized it on the basis that, they felt then, yes, there were always lots of little fires, but they were concentrating on the big fires. And then when the little fire became a big fire is when it got their attention, and it was literally somebody banging on their door. And I can relate to that as a CEO or as a founder CEO, because there are always things that you could be dealing with, and it's a question of like, what's a little fire, what's a big fire, and what's going to move the needle and what's not. And I guess in the early days, you're asking yourself the question, am I going to lose a sale or win a sale in the back of this effort, right? Because you're in the business of selling, right? Without sales, you can have a great company, great product, but it's not going to last, right? You have to feed the engine. That's not the only thing, of course. As you move down the path, you have other concerns, but I can definitely relate to that one. And the other thing that strikes me, you make the comment that, you were with Hopin during the incredible growth phase. It was during COVID, and I guess it was the latter state. So you would have experienced that kind of hyper growth. You experienced significant growth, very significant growth at Gainsight, and that's. I mean, it's great to have that experience. It's nice to be able to do that on someone else's dime as well, just as a founder. Because there's a lot of very expensive lessons. It's great to have to deal with that. It's a quality problem, as they say, to have to deal with hypergrowth. But it does present its own problems. But then, the back end of that. So if we go back here 2 years, you're kind of probably still in COVID around the founding of your company, or just So what was it that led you to say, okay, I'm going to go for it? This is my next move.
Well, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing to admit on record, but I didn't want to be a CEO. Like, this wasn't a aspiration of mine, namely because having worked for Nick, I've seen what great looks like, and having a bit of humility and knowing where I'm at relative to someone like Nick, like at least, I don't know, maybe it's imposter syndrome creeping in or something, but I didn't feel like I could ever be what Nick was to Gainsight. And so he's a character, but truly like authentic, right? Like truly cares and has a superhuman ability to make every single person feel like the most important person in the room, whether you're a VP or a executive around the table, the frontline kind of person at the company, or a random member of the community that we were serving who he remembers their name. And I'm like, gosh, how do you do that? So only one example of so many that I would point to Nick as just such a great CEO. But that was always in the back of my mind. There were two things that really came up, and this was during kind of the tail end of the Hopin tenure. One was this idea for this product, which effectively has been sort of my master's thesis is kind of how I describe it. Like I've been working on what we now refer to as owned media since my first marketing job in 2013. But the trade winds around marketing have shifted in favor of this playbook being the predominant way to generate revenue kind of moving forward. And beyond that, there's still no underlying technology kind of platform to power this shift. And so what we had done at Gainsight, we built it in-house. At Front, we used a third-party agency, and it was at Hopin hearing my revenue marketing team on one side telling me how they could build it in a weekend, but it would look horrible and not kind of connect at all to our systems as we would have wanted. Or my brand team who said, hey, like it's going to take us 6 months. We'll RFP it. It's about $1 million for an agency. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there has to be, in the shadow of Salesforce Plus and the hustle being acquired by HubSpot, some underlying technology for this, and there wasn't. So that was a problem that I just couldn't sort of let go of, and everything was sort of hitting me at that specific moment. Like someone needs to build this, and gosh, I feel like I know how to build this thing. And the second part was, feeling again on the backside of Hopin, but I would say more than that, just being on the other side of Gainsight, on the other side of greatness, right? And seeing what that was like and knowing, not every CEO in the world is, what Nick is. He's special. But what would it look like if I went to work every day and from a personal fulfillment perspective, from a purpose-driven kind of perspective, I could work every day on creating something that was as valuable as what Gainsight was to the team that was a part of it. That motivated me quite a bit. So it's really a convergence of those two things. There was like a personal challenge / like finding meaning in my work type of a thing where I feel like I could, in my best attempt, even though, I'm human and I fail every single day, try to build something, a values-driven company, a culture that truly cares about all stakeholders, their teammates, their families, our partners, our customers, of course, as well as bring this idea to market that it just feels like now is the time for this to really take center stage for our industry, and I just couldn't say no to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sold, and I was sold, and I'm a happy client, and I have to say your team has been absolutely brilliant. But I'll also say that you do get a sense of what the company is like from the people you interact with, and it's clear you're building a great culture there.
Thank you.
So congrats on that. I mean, the premise, I think the timing is great, and the premise to me is very obvious. And I mean, just for our audience, just if you can articulate that just briefly, the principle behind, rented media versus owned media, and what's the primary premise of the business?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even taking a step back from that, like if you talk to any marketer or CMO today, it has never been harder to generate pipeline for your business or drive revenue for a company. We've seemingly lost control of our ability to impact those metrics. And the reason is we are still implementing a playbook today as an industry that is almost 20 years old. You can call it inbound marketing from a HubSpot perspective, where you're basically writing SEO articles for an algorithm to rank your page hopefully drive enough traffic through that ranking to your website, convert 1 to 2% of that traffic into a demo request, and so on. And the challenge is, first of all, we're all doing it and we're all getting better at running that strategy. But also, if you look at just kind of the overall dynamics around the industry, it's just not as effective as it used to be. In fact, even John Miller, who was the part of the architect of that strategy under a different business they referred to as marketing automation, he recently posted a blog post that says, "The marketing playbook I helped create no longer works." So if you don't believe me, believe that guy. And I think underlying it is the premise that we, as a marketing industry, as a marketing practice, we've spent, again, all of this time trying to convert the 5% of our market who is currently looking for solutions. Trying to squeeze as much as we can out of that 5%, almost at the expense of the 95% who cares about this topic, who cares about kind of the overall, thought leadership that we're producing as a company. But we're just letting them bounce off of our website and we're not giving them anywhere to really go. And so what we are referring to as owned media is basically this belief that by producing the type of content that people actually want to engage with, podcasts like this one,
Yep.
live streams, video production, we're able to pierce through the noise and develop a direct relationship with our audience. So it's more about, almost like less about the media, more about the relationship between a brand and an audience.
Yep.
It becomes first party. And so effectively, members of our audience are subscribing directly to us for our thought leadership versus going through an intermediary algorithm like LinkedIn or Google or even YouTube and Spotify and others. And so it's not to suggest, we do talk about rented media as some of those spaces,
Yep.
LinkedIn, YouTube and others.
Yeah.
It's very important. We have to be there. We have to be present in those spaces where our audience is. But the idea is, how do we leverage engagement in those networks to drive the owned relationship,
Yeah.
which ultimately is going to give us a ton more leverage on converting the willing within that kind of first party data model to becoming customers of the product,
Yeah.
of our products.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so we're effectively, in addition to championing this new movement, building the underlying technology that helps companies take advantage of that. You can think of it as, in today's model, it's a little bit of like a CMS for multimedia that has a bit of like a Substack kind of feel to it. Over time, this becomes kind of a new way to think about marketing automation,
Yeah.
where we're using machine learning to kind of separate the signal from the noise and drive, the right offers in front of the right customers at the right time.
Yeah, well, I'm personally excited to see where it goes, and you touched there on clearly there's a strong technology that sits underneath this proposition, and it seems to me like you're really doing a great job of navigating a challenge that I think a lot of founders face, which is first of all, how do you find a technical co-founder? Right, you may have a great idea, but it's like, where do I start? And I'm not a coder, or I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, how did you navigate that? And working with your co-founder Tyler Sparks, how did that come about? And is there kind of a separation of church and state there, that Tyler is kind of the technical lead and you're kind of the face and let's say this. Initially, you're the sales arm of the business, right? You're getting it. You're engaging your target market and evangelizing your proposition.
Yeah. Well, look, I definitely, this was tough. There were not a lot of best practices on how to find a technical co-founder. There was, I think, at the long tail, things like founder dating and all of that. But for me, I had sort of one lead of someone I wanted to reach out to, didn't end up working out. So I was like, what do I do? Do I just go to LinkedIn and start like hunting for VPs of engineering from reputable companies or folks and just cold email them and ask them to go on a 10-year blind journey with me and give them, 30 to 50% of the business? I didn't know. And I think, looking back at the time, at least, shame on me for not spending time developing relationships with technical kind of contemporaries as I was building my career. So I met Tyler actually through, I know his brother very, very well, was kind of mentoring him throughout his career. He worked for me at Hopin and so got introduced through his brother. And what was really interesting at the time with Tyler was two things. One, he had a technical roadmap for um, basically a very similar kind of concept to what we were doing, but not the use case. Not he didn't have the problem identified, but he had this vision from a technical kind of architecture perspective on what he was trying to build in his career,
Yeah.
and so that was very
He was
appealing.
with Sling, right?
Sling,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
which was the second thing. Like
Yep.
he worked in streaming
Yep.
basically and creating content experiences using machine learning to actually generate, more engagement out of your content from a consumer perspective. So there's a lot of application to the problem from the B2C kind of perspective. And then the third bit is just great sense of like shared values, from a company building perspective. I think that stuff, pays dividends in time. So we formalized the relationship and have been kicking things off. Been working together now for 18 months, going on almost 2 years. I think that it's tough because you're bringing up a really good point. Like when you're a business founder, you don't know, right? Like you don't know, like, should we use, Python on a normal service-based architecture to solve this problem, or should we do micro front end work and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. Like, I need to learn it and have an informed opinion as the CEO, but I got to trust you to kind of own your business, own this kind of, this challenge. And then we're going to intersect in several areas, sales, as you mentioned, for sure. Second is having built this product before, and I use built kind of loosely there, but having cobbled together and Frankensteined this product together with off-the-shelf tools, I understood the pain very well. And so being able to both shed my own perspective on feature prioritization, customer kind of stories, and then tap my network too of pulling together advisors who were my peers as marketers and have them kind of be brought to the table to help with the ideas. That was kind of a little bit of where the overlap was, but I think you'd appreciate this, especially in the early days. You're kind of like doing everything. Well, when you're a
Yeah.
team of two, you're
Right.
definitely like
Yeah.
basically doing everything. So being able to have the partner who can own, in our case, engineering, product, and design, and kind of not take me out of it necessarily, but like be the person who is waking up each day, like, thinking about how we can move faster, smarter, not burn out the team, but like get to where our goals
Yep.
in the right way, is extremely helpful. You don't want to, like, it's a very lonely job, as
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well, like someone can talk
Well, I
about.
mean, that
But
massive.
I think having a partner that you can kind of divide and conquer with is going to be an important part of the journey. It
Yeah.
was for us. It is for us.
Yeah. And so just to kind of talk a little bit more about your journey. So just under 2 years in, I know you're in fundraising right now, hopefully coming towards the end of it. Um, what was that journey, your fundraising journey look like? I mean, did you bootstrap yourself to begin with? Was it friends and family? Was it, what did that look like, that journey?
Super interesting, and I'll share kind of what it looked like, 2 years ago, and what kind of dynamics as we think about what it looks like now,
Yeah.
because it's really interesting, between the two. So I am in my mid to late 30s. In a month, I'll probably start saying late 30s.
Right.
But I've got two kids at home.
Mhm.
Like this wasn't gonna be a bootstrapped kind of, eat ramen and
Yep.
kind of, work all weekend type of
Yeah. Yeah.
situations.
Sleeping bag in the
Um,
office or whatever.
exactly. Sounds great.
Yep.
But I have
There's a
some
time for that.
responsibilities. Yeah, exactly. So what I really spent a lot of my time, or I needed a way to kind of fast start into entrepreneurship, and honestly, like much to Hopin's credit, I asked if I could be a part of a layoff that they were doing, and they were gracious enough to let me be a part of it. So honestly, Audience Plus wouldn't have started without Hopin's support. That severance helped me kind of like bridge a little bit into the new role. So having basically separated formally from the company, thinking, okay, I've got a little bit of cash runway at this point. We built the deck. I'm a marketer still by trade. And so we ended up building the deck, telling the story, validating the story. And even before that, actually, it was an iPhone note, to come to think of it, but that turned into a deck. But I shopped the iPhone note to some investor friends, and a friend of mine that ran an accelerator, to Nick, actually, who has since become a great mentor, and just got a little bit of feedback back from them that, hey, I think you're onto something here. There's something good. And so what we did is I just parroted what I saw Nick do back at Gainside. Never having fundraised before. Again, this was 2022. And so I basically put together a doc send with our deck. I recorded a Loom video of me walking through the deck. I put together an email template. And on a Sunday, I sent that email template out to every investor I've met along the way, which I've had, I've been fortunate through Gainside especially to have a lot of exposure to the VC community.
Yeah.
And so I sent it to everyone. And the play that I ran there that I got from Nick was I set a boundary around it. I said, look, our expectation is to take meetings this week. Let me know, wide open.
Yeah.
We expect to review term sheets by Thursday and make our decision by Friday. And again, looking back now, what on earth gave me the right to say that?
That's great.
But
I love it.
Trying to fake it till I make it, to create some sort of
it's important. I mean, it's sales 101. I mean, you've got to.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what we ended up doing. We ended up basically creating that. And what was interesting is again, as a first time kind of person fundraising for the first time is people took us up on meetings. We booked up quick and we were full of meetings. And to your point, it was definitely an idea back then. It was myself, Tyler, and a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And thankfully we got, we got a seed round done
okay.
On the edge of that. Now looking backwards, I'd probably refer to that as a pre-seed round given where we were in our maturity, but I don't know what this all means.
It's the shifting sands. Yeah. But yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
And what I remember distinctly, which comes into play for kind of our experience, how we're thinking about things now is, the question I asked folks that obviously are now on our cap table, folks that passed, was how will I know I'm ready for a Series A? When do I reach back out, or when do we kind of check back in? And this was 2022. The response was, have a couple customers. If they're paying, that's great. If they're not paying, that's okay too. As long as they have the shared kind of use case, you should be okay. And I was great. And that was sort of my operating kind of principle moving forward. So fast forward, it wasn't all the way 18 months, but say, a year or so later, call it even where we are today, we've got, 20 or almost 30 customers all paying, we've got, without giving too much detail away, I would say significant revenue growth. And in 2023, that's not enough. That's not enough to go and do a Series A. It's a challenge. At least that's what I'm learning from the market. Folks want to see 1 to 2 million of ARR is what I'm hearing before doing the Series A. So it's really interesting to see the dynamics kind of shift a little bit. We're still, we've got plenty of runway. You mentioned, we are kind of closing out a financing round right now. But thank you. But seeing kind of how this dynamic, how the trade winds have evolved from when we first did the round earlier to where we are now, it's I'm grateful in a way that we have folks that believe in us, that are investing, and we're looking at this personally as more of an extension to our seed, or a true seed compared to the pre-seed we had prior. We don't want to be an early A, which inevitably becomes an early B, and you're sort of carrying that with you throughout the journey of company building. So we're kind of right sizing into 2023 into the reality of where we are today. But again, going back to the earlier discussion, I think this is how we build a generational company. It's we're not looking for the quick, 1-2 year kind of flip here on this business. We want to build something durable and enduring.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what's guiding a lot of our thinking in this process.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, the ability to raise in this market and to be able to hit those marks, that is to be congratulated. Definitely, there's been a significant shift. We work, as you know, in the private equity and venture capital space, and apart from being a relatively early stage company ourselves and been through that fundraising process, the difference between 18 months ago and today, and that funding environment, the expectations, the bar has definitely been raised. The expectation is that you've got some kind of visibility, almost like a path to profitability. Whereas before it was kind of growth at all costs, and let's double down and invest and get market share. And it's a far more, far less forgiving market and far more challenging environment to raise in. So that's definitely to be applauded.
And I hang my hat on the saying that says, not hang my hat, but take courage in that great companies are built in markets like this one, right? And so I think having that the right term is not conservatism, but thoughtfulness
Yep.
from a company building, from a spend management perspective, I think is going to hopefully pay off for both of our businesses
Yep.
kind of over the long term. So
Absolutely. Yep. Forces you to be to be a lot more mindful as a result. Um, so you're going to come out of that, close that fundraise. Like what kind of trends are you seeing now that are exciting you as you kind of build on that base of clients that you've got? What's next for Audience Plus?
yeah, I mean, I think for us, a few different things. I think to our earlier conversation, there's still a lot of product to build. There's still a lot of we got to close that gap between vision and reality for our customers, which I think is the number one thing keeping me up at night as a founder. Second, maybe in no particular order, we want to be the world's best example of doing the thing we're asking our customers to do. And I think we had a really strong start out of the gates. We kind of slowed down as as we brought the product to market and our resources got stretched, in a way that we weren't, we wish things kind of went a little differently there. So now we're kind of getting back into being kind of a media producer, creating a lot more content. Here we are in a studio that we've built in our offices here in Arizona. And, again, in no particular order, but something that I'm thinking about a lot is just bringing the right type of people to the company. This phase of the journey is one, I guess I saw it in a way at Gainsight, but again, Nick was the one that was sort of like in the throes of making some of these decisions. And so I think it takes a special type of person to want to work in the 0 to 1 phase of company building. And so we're both, from a recruiting perspective, making sure that we're targeting the right folks, but also that we're starting to invest in the employee experience pretty early. And so I have to walk a balance at times between being the CMO of a at scale business and the biases I have from that
Yep.
to being a scrappy CEO.
Right. Right.
And
Yep.
part of me is like, yeah, but we need better onboarding. We need to support our employees better. And it's true. We do need to do that.
Yep.
And also we need to live to see another day and fight the good fight, for this month
Yep.
or this week's pipeline target or whatever. And so, I'm excited to get more folks hopefully around the table to help us, try and do both.
Yeah.
Try to do both things, at least in a healthy way.
Yeah. Well, it's that constant tension. You used the phrase earlier, the hard things, right? And we're all familiar with the hard thing about hard things from
Hard thing
Ben
about hard
Horowitz. And what stands out to me from that book, and I had the good fortune of working with Ben and Mark
Oh, wow.
at Opsware, which they cover a lot in the book. Was the wartime CEO versus the
Yeah.
peacetime CEO, and this is a difficult environment, so you kind of need that wartime CEO mentality, and of course you need to bring everybody with you. But some of the characteristics of a wartime CEO are that you do need to make those super difficult decisions, and constantly ask yourself, is this moving us towards the things that are really important? Are we hitting our sales targets, right? Are we bringing the revenue in to cover these costs? And I think the VC community in particular is becoming a lot more kind of attuned to that type of narrative, because they want to make sure that whatever it is that they're putting into the business, it's going to be appropriately deployed in what is a very tough environment. And I think that's the challenge right now. So when you think about the last couple of years, and we mentioned some of the challenges that you have there, what are the biggest challenges, maybe surprises even, that you've encountered in that move to founder, co-founder, CEO role?
Yeah. It's a very hard job, it turns out. And to our earlier conversation, it feels like nothing truly prepares you for it. Even, I had, I don't know, 15 years of operational experience before starting a company, and even so, it's difficult. The context switching, I think, in particular, is what stands out to me. And to go from a really great win in marketing to a really frustrated product manager, and then back to a great customer who's happy, to a prospect who's passing on working with you. It's just that I think is probably the part that I've put my finger on that is really part of the hardest parts. The other part that was really difficult I think, and Nick had always said that being a CEO is a very lonely role, but I never like fully understood it, and I think because you know I suppose it is in the sense that like, there's a lot of pressure on you, and you know, I don't know, a soft approach, a soft sort of level of empathy with that statement. But when you're living it, which I'm sure you can attest to, and others listening that are on either side of the board table, but maybe have seen founders really, go through this. It's like for everyone else, this is a job, and it could be a great job, by the way. I don't mean that in sort of a derogatory sense. But when you're putting sort of everything on the line to start the company, be it your reputation, be it wherever you are in the journey, it could be your salary and your very livelihood and your ability to contribute to your family, and provide for your family. To If you're a founder CEO, I think a lot of it too is like being ready for folks to call your baby ugly and say, I don't believe in this thing that you're saying. And then, even I have an amazing wife, an incredible wife and family, but it's hard for them to understand too, right? Where I don't want to bring some of the stuff home with me, but I'm a human, and it's hard sometimes to leave work at work, and maybe physically I'm not near my phone or near my computer, but like mentally, emotionally, like it's so hard to like completely turn that side of you off. And I think maybe over time, I could be wrong, maybe great CEOs figure out that balance over time. But I'm finding in the early stages of company building, those to be the hardest parts of this journey. Figuring out sales, figuring out marketing, figuring out product, like those are tactical things. Not tactical, they're very important things. But you bring great people around the table. You learn from mentors, from your board. They make great introductions. You learn from your customers. Some first principles I think have served us well, actually, and we had taken the approach of like building in public. So not keeping a lot close to the chest as we're kind of as I'm talking about the journey on LinkedIn and other places.
Yeah.
But I think you could figure all that stuff out with the right people, the right resources, the right introductions, and so on. But the part that's really hard is, I think, the emotional endurance that is building a company, that I don't think anyone candidly can really feel till they start doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can certainly relate to that, Anthony. It is challenging. I mean, it can be incredibly rewarding and incredibly demoralizing, in the same
Yep.
hour, much less the same day.
Same hour.
But
Totally.
yeah, I mean, I think it is challenging to leave work, as you say. But in a sense, I mean, this is just my personal opinion. I think that you need to be, particularly in the early years, and I mean this, hopefully you can maintain a healthy balance while you do this, but you need to be
Yeah.
obsessed with the business
Yes.
and obsessed with the success of the business, and be unapologetically attentive to the detail of the business. And
Yes.
I think there's a lot that comes with the challenge of growing the business, a lot of positive and negative, but it's that obsession, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure that there's a better word for it, that has to be there, and it is very difficult to divorce. Like work-life balance is not really a conversation you want to have with yourself in the early years, because it's something is going to suffer as a result.
Yeah.
So there is a natural imbalance in the early years to
Yeah.
make it successful. And as you know, there's such a low success rate with these businesses, that even when you're on a good path and the underlying business is growing and what have you, there's a survivability issue that is there constantly. And when you're taking in
Yes.
external capital, there are external expectations that come with it. And yeah, look, I mean, it's definitely not for everybody, but I have to say,
Yeah.
I think you're doing a tremendous job. Like I said earlier,
Thank you.
I'm sold. I think for anybody who is witnessing what's happening in this space, and I came from 20 plus years in the enterprise software space, and a lot of that in sales. That whole market is changing. Your go-to-market motion is changing.
Totally.
The way in which your customers are buying. In fact, I talked to my own sales team about we're not really here to sell. We're here to enable customers to buy. And so that does demand a different level of transparency. It demands relationship building before you've even spoken to them, which I think this content really plays a key part in. People can watch these, a podcast like this and get a sense of like what kind of individual am I dealing with Anthony or with Ferdi, and get some sense. And over time, actually start to build a relationship so that when they do come into that aperture of, hey, this is a good fit for us, they recognize it as much as we do, and it makes the job of buying a lot easier, or buyer enablement a lot easier.
And that's what Ferdi, like certainly all the hard things we hit on. I think those are the things that keep you going. Like you see the signal, you see the glimmer, you see the potential for this, and then you start talking about it, and then you see the validation in conversations just like this one in our relationship that we're honored to have you on board as a customer. You start to be like, we're not the only ones thinking this way as an individual founder, as a small team, and then as an ecosystem of customers, partners, and others. And it fuels your fire. It keeps you going. And so, yes, there are those hard times, but I think you start seeing those like little proof points along the way.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but for me personally, that's been what's like confirmed that we're doing the right thing and that we're on the right path.
It is. I mean, and it doesn't stop. Like, it continues as long as your products continue to evolve. It never gets. I mean, it's great to hear it the first time, but it doesn't get tiresome when you think, well, this either this company or this product or both didn't exist until I took action with some idea that I had. And yes, the team, takes a team to bring it to market, but you get that validation. It's like, we love it. We'd like to buy it. We'd like to part with cash for this. That's incredibly validating and exciting, and it is motivating. And thankfully, as long as you can maintain the balance between there being more of that and less of the other, you're onto it. You're onto a good thing.
You're on the right path. Yeah, totally.
Just in closing, Anthony, I know you mentioned there that you are kind of building in public. I think that's a great way of putting it. But that transparency is palpable. And I do think it's a great way to demonstrate, your platform. I mean, you're putting great content out there. As you say, you're investing in the studio, and if people want to learn more about Audience Plus, what are the channels that you're most active on, and how would they get in contact with you?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn, Anthony Kennada. I tend to post every day at this point, trying to document the journey, but also share learnings. I think someone posted this recently. I think makes a lot of sense. It's like, it's not meant to be self-promotional. It's meant to be like, hey, what are we learning? And if there's a nugget in there that's valuable to someone else that's listening to this podcast or following on LinkedIn, then it's all worth it in the end. And we're producing a lot of great content on audienceplus.com. So check us out. You can subscribe for free. And we're producing a lot of deeper playbooks and best practices and sharing community voices around people who care about this owned media strategy that we think is the next kind of generation of B2B marketing overall. Yeah. So check us out there.
Great. Well, with that, Anthony, I want to say thanks very much. We're excited to be working with you. We're excited to see where Audience Plus goes. I encourage everybody listening to check out Audience Plus. It is, to my mind, the future of market engagement, particularly in business to business. And with that, we'll wrap it up here on the People of Private Capital. Anthony Kennada, co-founder and CEO of Audience Plus. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ferdi. Appreciate it.
All right.